Happy Thanksgiving, everyone. All in Arrowhead here. Week 12 was packed with drama across the NFL, featuring tight finishes, big plays, and standout performances that are starting to shape the playoff picture. The Packers pulled out a hard-fought win over the Vikings, with Jordan Love making timely throws and connecting with his top targets to convert critical third downs, while Emmanuel Wilson and Romeo Doubs added consistency in the run and pass games to keep Green Bay ahead. The Lions came through in overtime against the Giants, with Jahmyr Gibbs and Amon-Ra St. Brown providing key rushing and receiving yards, and Jared Goff leading decisive drives late in the game. Baltimore held off the Jets behind Lamar Jackson's dual-threat capabilities, with the running game controlling the clock and the defense tightening up after an early score, while New England's victory over Cincinnati saw Drake May and the Patriots offense move the ball efficiently, converting scoring opportunities at crucial moments. Meanwhile, the Cowboys mounted a late comeback to defeat the Eagles, with Dak Prescott and George Pickens orchestrating key drives, and the Jaguars survived an overtime win against the Cardinals thanks to Trevor Lawrence's late-game execution. Now, Week 13 delivers the Thanksgiving slate, featuring 3 high-stakes matchups with playoff and divisional implications. The Packers visit Detroit for a pivotal NFC North showdown. The Cowboys host the Chiefs in primetime, with Patrick Mahomes leading Kansas City against a Dallas offense coming off a clutch win, and the Bengals travel to Baltimore to challenge the Ravens in an AFC clash with significant playoff ramifications. Each game will test execution, resilience, and depth, and performances this week could define the path for multiple teams as we move toward the final stretch of the season. Let's get into the games! The Green Bay Packers head into Thanksgiving after a convincing 23-6 win over the Vikings in Week 12, a game where they controlled the tempo from start to finish by leaning on the run and suffocating on defense. Emmanuel Wilson, in place of Josh Jacobs, grinded out tough yards and scored on a red zone plunge, while Jordan Love avoided mistakes and converted several third downs to keep sustained drives alive. Green Bay's defense set the tone early by holding Minnesota without a touchdown, allowing only 2 field goals, and sealed the afternoon with back-to-back interceptions in the fourth quarter, while also limiting explosive plays and forcing multiple 3-and-outs that allowed the offense to play on a short field. On the other side, the Detroit Lions enter at 7-4 after an emotional 34-27 overtime win against the Giants in Week 12, where Jahmyr Gibbs delivered one of the breakout performances of the season with 219 total yards, including a 69-yard touchdown sprint to end the game, while Jared Goff found rhythm off play action and connected on several intermediate throws that kept Detroit in striking distance after trailing late. Detroit's defense had its struggles, allowing long scoring drives and missing tackles in space, but came up with a critical fourth quarter stop that set up the tying field goal before the offense took over in overtime in one play by Gibbs' game winner. With both teams riding momentum into the holiday spotlight, this matchup will hinge on whether the Packers can dictate pace with their defense, or if the Lions' explosive playmakers can once again break open a tight game, and I'm picking Detroit to move to 8-4, while the Packers fall to 7-4-1. The Kansas City Chiefs head into Thanksgiving at 6-5 after a dramatic 23-20 overtime win over the Indianapolis Colts in Week 12, a game defined by clutch plays and late-game heroics. Patrick Mahomes threw for 352 yards, orchestrating multiple fourth-quarter drives to erase an 11-point deficit, while Rashee Rice turned in a monster performance with 8 catches for 141 yards. Kareem Hunt added 104 rushing yards and a touchdown on 30 carries, keeping the ground game balanced and productive. Harrison Butker nailed a 27-yard game-winning field goal in overtime, and the Chiefs' defense forced 4 consecutive 3-and-outs from the Colts late, preventing any comeback opportunities and showing their ability to rise to the occasion under pressure. Meanwhile, the Dallas Cowboys enter Thanksgiving at 5-1 after an improbable 24-21 comeback win over the Philadelphia Eagles in Week 12. Down 21-0 at halftime, Dak Prescott rallied his offense with 354 passing yards and 2 touchdowns, while George Pickens hauled in 9 catches for 146 receiving yards and a score, proving the offense can strike quickly in crunch time. Dallas's defense stiffened after halftime, forcing a fumble and holding the Eagles scoreless in the second half, giving the Cowboys offense the chance to mount a historic rally. This matchup will test Kansas City's resilience and ability to protect leads against Dallas's newfound momentum, as it should be a high-stakes, closely contested affair as both teams fight to climb back toward playoff contention. I'm picking the Chiefs to edge out the Cowboys and move to 7-5, while Dallas falls to 5-6-1. The Cincinnati Bengals enter Thanksgiving night at 3-8 after a 26-20 loss to the Patriots in Week 12, a game defined by missed chances despite Cincinnati moving the ball effectively at stretches. Joe Flacco threw for more than 180 yards and a touchdown, while Andre Yoshivas led the receiving corps with 61 yards on 4 catches, and tight end Tanner Hudson added several key chain-moving receptions to keep drives alive. Running back Chase Brown chipped in steady production with 107 rushing yards, including a 28-yard burst in the second quarter, but the offense converted only once in the red zone and settled for field goals that shifted momentum. Cincinnati briefly pulled even early in the fourth quarter before the defense allowed a long scoring drive, capped by a short field goal, and on their final possession the Bengals stalled near midfield after pressure forced consecutive incompletions, continuing a trend of late-game struggles that has defined much of their season. Meanwhile, the Baltimore Ravens come in at 6-5 after a 23-10 win against the Jets in Week 12, where Lamar Jackson threw for over 150 yards and added timely scrambles to extend drives, and Baltimore's backfield combined for 98 yards to control tempo after a slow first quarter. The Ravens' defense tightened after giving up an early touchdown, forcing 2 turnovers including a fourth-quarter interception, and held the Jets to 282 total yards while limiting explosive gains and generating steady pressure off the edge, especially on third down. With Cincinnati still searching for rhythm and the Ravens playing with growing confidence on both sides of the ball, I'm picking Baltimore to improve to 7-5 while the Bengals drop to 3-9. The Chicago Bears enter this holiday showdown at 8-3 after a gritty 31-28 win over the Pittsburgh Steelers in Week 12, a victory highlighted by strong late-game execution and timely contributions across the roster. Quarterback Caleb Williams threw for 239 yards and 3 touchdowns, including 2 precise strikes to DJ Moore that put Chicago ahead in the third quarter, while running back Kyle Monangai added a crucial 2-yard touchdown run. The Bears' defense came up big in key moments, forcing multiple turnovers and limiting explosive plays when the Steelers tried to mount a late comeback. On special teams, Cairo Santos converted his only field goal attempt, keeping the pressure on Pittsburgh in a tight game that went down to the final possession. Meanwhile, the Philadelphia Eagles come in at 8-3 after a 24-21 loss to the Dallas Cowboys, a game in which they squandered a 21-point lead. Philadelphia racked up over 350 total yards, with A.J. Brown catching 8 passes for 110 yards and a touchdown, while Jalen Hurts and Saquon Barkley combined for 55 rushing yards and 2 scores. Defensive lapses and 14 penalties for 96 yards allowed Dallas to erase the lead, and a stalled final drive that left the Eagles in their own territory sealed their fate. As the two teams face off on Black Friday, Chicago will look to maintain their late-game composure, while Philadelphia aims to rebound and exploit matchups in the secondary and along the offensive line. With their balanced attack and ability to capitalize on key turnovers, I'm picking Philadelphia to earn the win and improve to 9-3, while the Bears fall to 8-4. The Saints enter Week 13 at 2-9 after a 24-10 loss to the Falcons in Week 12, a game where New Orleans never found rhythm as Tyler Shough finished with 243 yards on 30 completions with 1 interception, and the offense managed only 83 total yards in the first half while going 5 for 16 on third down. Rookie back Devin Neal was held to 18 yards on 7 carries as the Saints crossed midfield just twice in the first half, stalling repeatedly due to negative runs and costly penalties. The lone spark came from Justin Reed's 49-yard pick six that briefly cut the deficit, before the defense allowed a touchdown drive in the fourth quarter that took 3 plays for 68 yards. On the other side, Miami comes in at 4-7 off their bye, following a 16-13 overtime win against the Commanders in Madrid in Week 11, leaning on Devon Achane's 120 rushing yards and 45 receiving yards, while Tua Tagovailoa completed 14 of 20 passes for 171 yards, and the offense controlled possession for under 33 minutes. The Dolphins' defense held Washington to 6 for 13 on third down, limited the run game to 5.2 yards per carry, and sealed the win when Jack Jones intercepted Marcus Mariota on the first play of overtime to set up Riley Patterson's 29-yard game winner. With New Orleans unable to sustain drives, struggling to protect late in games, and Miami coming in rested with momentum and improved situational play, I'm taking the Dolphins to move to 5-7, while the Saints fall to 2-10. The Texans enter Week 13 at 6-5 after edging the Bills 23-19 in Week 12. A gritty win defined by a defensive front that dominated all night with 8 sacks on Josh Allen and 2 takeaways, including Kalen Bullock's game-clinching interception inside the red zone with under a minute left. Davis Mills completed 16 of 30 passes for 153 yards and 2 touchdowns, finding Christian Kirk for a red zone score and leaning on a quick passing script, as Houston struggled to establish the run and finished with fewer than 270 total yards. Ka'imi Fairbairn connected on all 3 of his field goal attempts, including a key fourth quarter kick that pushed the lead to 2 possessions before Buffalo rallied late, and Houston's defense held the Bills to only 3 points over the final 2 quarters, despite several short field situations. The Colts, meanwhile, come in at 8-3 after a 23-20 overtime loss to the Chiefs, a game where Indianapolis jumped ahead early and moved the ball efficiently before stalling in the fourth quarter and failing to score on 4 straight drives, including the opening possession of overtime that ended near midfield. Daniel Jones threw for 181 yards and 2 touchdowns, Jonathan Taylor led the way with only 58 rushing yards, and defensive end Laiatu Latu had a first quarter interception that set up a go-ahead touchdown, but Indianapolis converted only 5 times on third down and allowed Kansas City to tie the game late before losing on a 27-yard walk-off kick. Houston's defensive surge has kept them in tight games, but the Colts have bounced back after every setback this season, and with more offensive balance and cleaner late-game execution, I'm picking Indianapolis to improve to 9-3, while the Texans fall to 6-6. The Falcons enter Week 13 at 4-7 after a much-needed 24-10 win over the Saints in Week 12, a game where Atlanta finally looked balanced on both sides of the ball. Kirk Cousins completed 16 of 23 passes for 199 yards and 2 touchdowns, opening the scoring with a 9-yard strike to David Sills, and later delivering the knockout moment in the fourth quarter when he hit Darnell Mooney deep down the right sideline for a 49-yard touchdown. Bijan Robinson added 70 rushing yards and contributed through the air with 37 receiving yards, showing his dual-threat ability under that offensive scheme. Defensively, the Falcons recovered a fumble by New Orleans early, held the Saints without a touchdown after halftime, and sealed the game when rookie safety Xavier Watts intercepted a pass by Tyler Shuck with just 16 seconds left. The Jets, meanwhile, come in at 2-9 after a 23-10 loss to the Ravens in Week 12, where Tyrod Taylor guided a sharp 12-play, 79-yard drive, capped by a 13-yard touchdown to John Mechie, but New York's offense stalled the rest of the way, finishing with only 1 score across its final 6 possessions. The Jets were undone by mistakes, including a fumble at the 2-yard line when Marlon Humphrey punched the ball out of Breece Hall's hands and Baltimore recovered, and the defense wore down as the Ravens put together back-to-back touchdown drives in the third quarter behind Derrick Henry's 2 short rushing scores and a run game that consistently moved the chains, with Atlanta finally generating explosive plays and the Jets continuing to struggle in closing moments and finishing drives. I'm picking the Falcons to improve to 5-7, while New York drops to 2-10. The 49ers enter Week 13 at 8-4 after a 20-9 win over the Panthers in a Monday night matchup where San Francisco controlled the game even without explosive scoring, leaning on Christian McCaffrey to pace the offense as he ran for 89 yards and a touchdown, while Brock Purdy completed 23 passes for 193 yards, connecting with George Kittle for several important chain-moving catches, despite also throwing 3 interceptions that kept Carolina hanging around. Still, the Niners repeatedly flipped momentum with timely defensive plays, as Jair Brown snagged 2 interceptions off Bryce Young to halt promising drives, and although the pass rush only recorded a single sack from Clelin Ferrell, it still forced pressure that led to stalled possessions and long third downs, allowing San Francisco to control field position and bleed the clock in the second half while methodically securing the win. Meanwhile, the Browns come into Week 13 at 3-8 after a 24-10 victory over the Raiders, where Cleveland's defense was the clear headliner, racking up 10 sacks including 3 from Myles Garrett, whose strip sack recovered by Malik Collins secured the win, while Shedeur Sanders hit a deep scoring strike to Dylan Sampson, and Quinshon Judkins punched in 2 direct snap touchdowns that capitalized on short fields created by defensive dominance. With the 49ers proving they can win even when not at their sharpest, and Cleveland still relying heavily on their defensive disruption to stay competitive, I'm picking San Francisco to take this one, moving the 49ers to 9-4 while the Browns fall to 3-9. The Los Angeles Rams enter Week 13 at 9-2 after a commanding 34-7 win over the Buccaneers in Week 12. A game where Matthew Stafford looked fully in control from the opening drive, throwing for 273 yards and 3 touchdowns while finding Davante Adams consistently on intermediate routes. Adams finished with 62 receiving yards and 2 scores, and the offense piled up chunk gains through play action, while Kyren Williams added balance with strong early rushing bursts. Los Angeles scored on its first 3 possessions, built a 31-7 halftime lead, and never allowed Tampa Bay to climb back in, outgaining them 333-193 while dominating time of possession. Defensively, the Rams generated steady pressure with 4 sacks, including key edge wins that forced hurried throws, and Kobe Durant's interception return for a touchdown in the first quarter widened their lead and shifted momentum in Tampa Bay's favor. Meanwhile, the Carolina Panthers enter at 6-6 after a 20-9 loss to the 49ers in Week 12, where Bryce Young threw for 169 yards with 1 touchdown and 2 interceptions, including one on the goal line and another in San Francisco's territory that ultimately sealed their fate. The Panthers struggled to establish rhythm, finishing with only 161 total yards, while their ground game was limited and their offensive line allowed repeated backfield penetration. A late 29-yard touchdown strike to Tetero and McMillan showed some spark, but Carolina couldn't capitalize on turnovers, as Brock Purdy threw 3 interceptions, yet the Panthers still came up empty. With the Rams executing efficiently on both sides of the ball and carrying strong momentum into December, and the Panthers searching for consistency while dealing with stalled offensive possessions, I'm picking Los Angeles to continue rolling and move to 10-2, while Carolina drops to 6-7. The Jaguars enter Week 13 at 7-4 after surviving a chaotic 27-24 overtime win against the Cardinals in Week 12, a performance that showed both their explosiveness and volatility. Trevor Lawrence threw 3 touchdown passes and moved the offense efficiently at times, connecting on a 9-yard strike to Parker Washington late in the fourth quarter to regain the lead, but he also committed 4 turnovers that kept Arizona in the game, including 3 interceptions and a strip sack that was returned for a score. Travis Etienne helped steady things with several key runs to set up manageable third downs, and Jacksonville's defense answered when it mattered most, piling up 6 sacks and forcing a turnover on downs in overtime after Cam Little drilled a 52-yard game winner. Meanwhile, the Titans come in at 1-10 after a 30-24 loss to the Seahawks in Week 12, where rookie quarterback Cam Ward completed 28 of 42 passes for 256 yards and added a late 1-yard rushing touchdown to keep the game close, but Tennessee struggled to finish meaningful drives and trailed throughout the afternoon. A 90-yard punt return touchdown by Chimere Dike briefly shifted momentum, Yet the Titans allowed Seattle to control possession behind 3 Jason Myers field goals and a short Zach Charbonnet touchdown run, and their final comeback attempt ended after failing to secure an onside kick. With Jacksonville showing resilience despite mistakes, and Tennessee still searching for consistency on both sides of the ball, I'm picking the Jaguars to pull away and improve to 8-4, while the Titans fall to 1-11. The Arizona Cardinals enter Week 13 at 3-8 after a 27-24 overtime loss to the Jaguars in Week 12. A game where Jacoby Brissett threw for 317 yards with a touchdown while completing several clutch third down throws to keep Arizona in striking distance. The run game provided balance with only 55 rushing yards and a second quarter touchdown that helped the Cardinals erase an early deficit. Michael Wilson led the receiving group with 10 catches for 118 yards, and Greg Dortch scored a 39-yard touchdown that put Arizona ahead with 7 minutes to play, but the offense went 5 for 16 on third down and missed chances on 2 red zone possessions, including an overtime drive that crossed midfield before stalling after a sack and a short run that led to a punt. Defensively, the Cardinals forced a fumble in the first half and held Jacksonville to just 7 points in the third quarter, but they struggled late against the run and allowed the game-winning kick after giving up a pair of chunk completions that flipped field position. Meanwhile, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers come in at 6-5 after a 34-7 loss to the Rams in Week 12, where the offense never established momentum as Baker Mayfield was limited to 41 passing yards before exiting with a shoulder injury, and Teddy Bridgewater finished with just over 60 yards. The run game, however, was efficient despite the offensive troubles, combining for 123 rushing yards. Tampa Bay's receivers were held to under 35 yards each, and the offensive line allowed consistent pressure that led to multiple stalled drives, including a pick six by Kobe Durant that shifted the game in favor of Los Angeles. Defensively, the Buccaneers surrendered 3 passing touchdowns, allowed over 270 yards through the air, and was only able to generate 1 sack on the day. Even with that performance, the Buccaneers have the healthier roster, the more reliable defense, and a chance to reset at home, so I'm picking Tampa Bay to bounce back and move to 7-5, while Arizona falls to 3-9. The Vikings head into Week 13 still searching for stability after a 23-6 loss in Green Bay, where they never found the end zone and came up empty on both red zone trips, settling for only 2 field goals despite moving the ball early and crossing midfield on multiple possessions. J.J. McCarthy threw for just 87 yards as Minnesota shifted almost entirely to the ground game, and although Jordan Mason picked up 42 yards and kept a few drives alive, the offense went 2 for 9 on third down, struggled with protection, and stalled repeatedly once the Packers tightened coverage. Justin Jefferson was held to 48 yards with little room to separate, and the defense couldn't flip the script, allowing Green Bay to control the pace with long, methodical drives that drained the clock and kept Minnesota out of rhythm while producing just 1 sack and failing to create a takeaway. Seattle enters with far more balance after a 30-24 win in Tennessee that opened with Sam Darnold hitting Jackson Smith-Njigba on a 63-yard touchdown to spark a quick start before the Seahawks leaned on the run, with Kenneth Walker grinding out 71 yards and Zach Charbonnet finishing a sustained march with a short touchdown. Cooper Kupp also came through with several clutch grabs to extend possessions. Jason Myers knocked through 3 field goals, including one in the fourth quarter that widened the gap, and the defense tightened up by forcing the Titans to go scoreless on 4 straight drives, while keeping Cam Ward and Tony Pollard from gaining any momentum on the interior. With Minnesota struggling to finish possessions and Seattle playing cleaner football on both sides, I'm taking the Seahawks to move to 9-3, while the Vikings fall to 4-8. The Buffalo Bills enter Week 13 at 7-4 after a draining 23-19 loss in Houston, a game where they repeatedly put themselves in position to take control but couldn't finish. Ray Davis's 97-yard kickoff return in the middle of the second quarter gave them life, but the Texans responded with a 6-play, 75-yard drive to end the half. Allen battled through constant pressure all night, taking 8 sacks and throwing 2 interceptions, including one on a red zone rollout that sealed the game for Houston, which followed a stunning 4th and 27 hook and lateral in the final minutes to keep hope alive. Khalil Shakir was the bright spot with 110 yards on 8 catches, repeatedly bailing out long yardage situations, with penalties and breakdowns in protection, as well as a fumble recovered by Kalen Bullock, erased too many chances. Meanwhile, the Pittsburgh Steelers come in at 6-5 after a 31-28 loss to the Bears, where they fell behind early but clawed back with a balanced fourth-quarter surge led by Mason Rudolph, who guided a 17-play touchdown drive that drained nearly 8 minutes and pulled them within 3. Pittsburgh's defense tightened late, forcing consecutive punts and giving the offense 2 opportunities to tie, yet their last shot ended when a 4th and 6 pass near midfield was tipped at the line, sealing the defeat after a day where they struggled to generate consistent explosive plays. With the Bills trying to clean up execution and the Steelers showing they can hang deep into games, this matchup feels like another tight finish, but Buffalo's playmakers give them the edge to rebound and move to 8-4, while Pittsburgh slips to 6-6. The Las Vegas Raiders enter Week 13 at 2-9 after a 24-10 loss to the Browns in Week 12, a game where they moved the ball between the 20s but stalled repeatedly once crossing midfield, coming away empty on 2 drives that reached the red zone and punting 6 times. Geno Smith threw for more than 280 yards and completed several timing throws to stretch the field, with Tyler Lockett leading the offense with over 60 receiving yards and a handful of chain-moving catches, but he was also nearly intercepted twice on pressured snaps and the Raiders failed to generate explosive plays. Their lone touchdown came in the 4th quarter after a short field, yet the run game produced only 60 yards and never controlled tempo, while the defense gave up 2 back-breaking touchdown drives in the 1st quarter. Meanwhile, the Los Angeles Chargers come in at 7-4 following their Week 12 bye, still looking to reset after a 35-6 loss to the Jaguars, where Justin Herbert finished with fewer than 100 passing yards and was sacked 3 times, the run game was held to under 50 rushing yards, and Los Angeles managed just 6 points on 2 field goal attempts in the first half. Defensively, the Chargers struggled to get off the field as Jacksonville sustained long drives, scored touchdowns on 3 straight possessions, and controlled the ball for most of the afternoon while limiting Los Angeles to under 150 total yards. With the Raiders searching for any rhythm and the Chargers returning home with something to prove in the AFC race, I'm taking Los Angeles to rebound and move to 8-4 while the Raiders drop to 2-10. The Broncos come into Week 13 at 9-2 after grinding out a 22-19 win over the Chiefs, a performance that once again highlighted their ability to rise in tight late-game situations. Bo Nix threw for 295 yards and looked poised throughout, spreading the ball efficiently and hitting Courtland Sutton and Troy Franklin for several momentum-swinging games, including the deep shot that put Denver in position for the deciding field goal. Jaleel McLaughlin powered in Denver's only touchdown, and although the Broncos committed an uncharacteristic 147 yards in penalties, their defense repeatedly answered the bell, with Jaquan McMillian coming up with a huge red zone interception that changed the flow of the second half, and the pass rush forcing Mahomes into quick off-platform throws. On the other side, the Commanders dropped to 3-8 after a frustrating 16-13 overtime loss to the Dolphins in Madrid, where Marcus Mariota posted 213 passing yards with a touchdown and helped steer a run game that piled up 172 yards, but Washington struggled to finish promising drives and missed opportunities across the second half. Their defense produced 2 massive goal line stands that kept them in it, but Mariota's interception on the first overtime possession immediately swung control back to Miami and ultimately sealed their fate. With Denver finding answers in every critical moment, and Washington continuing to slip in late, high-pressure sequences, I'm picking the Broncos to move to 10-2, while the Commanders drop to 3-9. The New York Giants head into Week 13 at 2-10 after a gut-wrenching 34-27 overtime loss to the Detroit Lions in Week 12. A game that showcased their offensive potential but also highlighted persistent struggles in closing out tight contests. Quarterback Jameis Winston threw for 366 yards and 2 touchdowns, including a spectacular 33-yard touchdown reception on a trick play, while wide receiver Wan'Dale Robinson was a standout with 156 receiving yards and a score. Running backs Tyrone Tracy and Devin Singletary added 109 rushing yards, yet the Giants' defense struggled at key moments, surrendering a 49-yard touchdown run and giving up a 69-yard overtime touchdown to Jahmyr Gibbs on the first play, emphasizing ongoing issues in stopping explosive plays late in games. The team also struggled in third down conversions, converting only 8 for 16, which kept them on the field longer and gave Detroit's offense more opportunities to exploit mismatches. Meanwhile, the New England Patriots enter Week 13 at 10-2 following a hard-fought 26-20 win against the Cincinnati Bengals, overcoming an early deficit with a balanced attack. Quarterback Drake May threw for 294 yards and 2 touchdowns, while tight end Hunter Henry added a critical score and wide receiver Demario Douglas contributed a key 37-yard reception to maintain momentum on drives. The Patriots' defense forced 2 turnovers, including a pick 6 from Marcus Jones, and limited Cincinnati to just 36% on third down conversions. Kicker Andy Borregales made 4 field goals, including a 52-yard strike late in the fourth quarter that ultimately sealed the victory. New England's efficiency on both sides of the ball keeps them positioned for a top playoff seed, while the Giants face the stark reality of being the first team officially eliminated from postseason contention. For this Week 13 matchup, I'm taking New England to move to 11-2, while the Giants drop to 2-11.